This evening, Barry Jenkins.
How y'all doing? Very good, based on the reactions in the crowd there during the screening. My name is Deacon Jenkins, and I will be here for this service at the much thanks to the cast and crew who are here that gave so much to us, clearly, in this wonderful, beautiful film. So please, without further ado, welcome writer-director Theodore Witcher, producer Julia Chasman, cinematographer Ernie Holzman, editor Maisie Hoy, music supervisor Pilar McCurry, composer Daryl Jones, actress Bernadette Speaks, Bill Bellamy, Lisa Nicole Carson, Isaiah Washington, Lorenz Tate, and of course, my queen, Nia Long. We also want to bring up Mr. Leonard Roberts. Come on up here, Leonard. And I want to give a special shout out to Helena Perez, formerly Helena Echegoyen, who was the New Line executive who got this whole thing rolling and made Love Jones possible. Also, Robbie Reed, Nick Wexler, and all you people who I'm sure saw Love Jones in cinemas when it was released in 1997.
Where do we sit?
Wherever you want, bro. We're just gonna do it. No assigned seat in here. We're just gonna do it. So, because y'all gonna talk and say all y'all got to say, I just want to tell my story about this movie before we begin. So, I saw this film. I saw it on a date, and I remember 'cause I grew up in Miami, you know, in the projects. So
Isaiah.
Yes, the projects in Miami. So the people in this film were not like the people that I grew up with. I remember this girl looking at me afterwards like, who was this dude and what is up with him? She was like, you are an alien. But I was smart. I'd already bought the soundtrack. So on the drive home from the theater, I put the soundtrack in. And then I was cool as hell. So thank you, my friend. Thank you very much. And I wanted to start off by asking you, how did this film come to be, man? Where did the idea come from? Just take me back to point one.
Okay. Well, first, let me just preface all of that by saying, Barry Jenkins.
Yeah.
How's that? Not bad.
Yeah.
Thank you to Bettina Fisher and Dina and Randy and everybody at the Academy for putting on this event. We appreciate that. How about one last round of applause for your outgoing president, Cheryl Boone Isaacs. Yeah. He's here somewhere. I think she's done a fantastic job these last few years at the Academy, and thank you to her. Now, I had come to Hollywood. I'll make this as brief as possible. I had come to Hollywood on a job working for the Hughes brothers, and I arrived and got fired immediately. And I had early, which is, you know, if you know the, anyway, it's Alan Robertson. I had before I had moved to Los Angeles, I had sort of been a kind of amateur poet and been involved in a world that was very similar to what depicted in the movie. And I just sort of kept the world of that in the back of my mind as something that might be interesting, but I never really thought that I could do anything with it. I came here to write a different kind of movie, and I had met Helena Echegoyen, Helena Perez now, but at the time, it's Helena Echegoyen. She's out here somewhere.
Where are you?
Helena. Okay, there's Helena Echegoyen Perez. Okay, who was an executive at New Line at the time. And so we had we knew each other just sort of around. And she said, what are you doing? I had written a movie, I'd gotten fired off this job or whatever. And I said, well, I have this idea. It's you know, she's a photographer and he's a poet, and I don't know, they fall in love or something like that, and blah, blah, blah. She was like, write that. Literally like that. And I was like, really? I don't think that's something I could get really through Hollywood. That's, you know, came here to write The French Connection. That's really what I wanted. And she was like, no, I want to see that movie. Write that. So I wrote it. And she helped me, and then Nick Wexler. Where's Nick Wexler?
Right there.
That guy.
Nick.
Yo,
Nick.
yo, Nick Wexler. That guy is a Hollywood legend.
Yes,
right
he
there.
is.
That guy has produced every major director of the last 25 years.
Thank you, Nick.
And little old me. And so we wouldn't be here without Nick and Helena and some other folks as well. Julia's on the panel. She'll speak as well. So anyway, so Nick had gotten a hold of the script, said he wanted to produce it, and then we set it up at New Line, and Helena got it through the system. And we set it up they made my deal in June, and we were greenlit and shooting in January. Right. Anybody who works in show business knows. That's insane. I thought it was like, Nick was like, hey, pal, you don't understand. It doesn't really work like this. It's my first movie, and I'm like, Nick, what are you talking about? It's me. Like, I came here with a dream, and that's how it goes, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you don't understand. It doesn't work like this. And after 20 years, it doesn't. But it did that time. So there you go. That's my long story about how we got started. And in 6 months, we were making the movie.
Word. And just real quick, what was the process of making the film like? Did you know that you were making this thing that was just special and beautiful and fucking wonderful and that?
Well, I mean, I tried to assemble a creative team and a cast that was as good as I could, being somebody who it was the first movie, so I had no reputation to fall back on, no other work to show, to get people excited about working with me. It was like, I'm just a guy. So I did the best I could in assembling these fantastic people and got lucky that this particular group of people fell into the orbit of this movie. It was completely accidental. Just the movie gods kind of smiled.
The movie gods and Robbie Reed.
And as well, we should shout out Robbie Reed, who's out there.
Robbie.
Robbie's out there somewhere. Robbie Reed, the most important black casting director in the history of cinema.
Hi, Robbie Reed.
Who is responsible for everybody you know. Now, Robbie brought me, Lorenz and Nia came to me from Helena, Lorenz from the studio, and then Robbie brought everybody else. Brought me Isaiah and Bill and Lisa, and Leonard and Bernadette came to me in Chicago. They were cast in Chicago by Jane Alderman. But Robbie brought this middle part of the cast right here that I would not have been. I was very fortunate that Robbie decided to cast it.
It's kind of cool watching a movie. It's kind of like it's like this reunion of everybody who was kind of like a part of this thing, these iconic faces. And I forgot how so many of the scenes are these 8 characters, and you cut to a reaction, and you just get so much life. Again, as I heard in the auditorium, all this life given from all these faces up here. But I wanted to talk to Lorenz first, because I read this article that, you know, when the financing came together, it was contingent upon you in a certain way. And when I was doing the research, I looked back at it, I was like, oh yeah, it went from O-Dog to Darius. And again, I remember walking in the cinema and be like, that ain't O-Dog, you know? But clearly it was. So talk to me about, you know, the script coming to you and where you were in your career at that point and what it was like just to step into this character.
Ted, do you want to tell my version of your... No,
You tell your version and I'll correct
As
you.
you can see, we're all such
Yeah,
good
he's gonna-
friends, very honest up here. Go, Lorenz. You tell your version.
Well, Ted, you correct me. No, yeah, I guess the studio was pretty interested in working with me. I had done Minister Society.
He still auditioned. Sorry, I just...
Okay. I audition. Kind of true. However it was, I'm just very fortunate to have been next to Miss Neil Long. Audition, testing, whatever it was laid out as. But
You don't call it audition at that level. You call it a screen test.
screen test. Okay.
Feel nice.
Yeah. I'm humble. Listen, I will screen test with you right now.
Me too. Want
Yes.
to do it? Part 2.
Part 2. Screen testing. No, listen, when the script came to me, you know, I'm always looking for new challenges and something that would be different. And over my career, as I look back, you know, I don't typically have like sort of a one kind of movie that, you know, that I gravitate towards, different roles. I don't have the same move, if you will. And this was something that I thought would be kind of cool. I love the idea that these people spoke differently to each other. I love the idea that, you know, it was romantic. And at the same time, it was going to be in Chicago, and we hadn't really seen anything in my hometown quite like it. So I was able to get a chance to spend some time with Ted. I wanted to have a meeting of minds. He's from Chicago. And we had two sort of different points of views about who Darius was. But as I got to know him and to really commit to what the journey would be, you know, every step of the way, you know, he and I had tit for tat, but I'm very appreciative to him opening me up in my mind to a character that I hadn't played before. You know, there were things that sometimes I would be a little resistant about. Well, you know, like I'll tell you, I'm
starting to get uncomfortable.
No, in a good way. It was just creative things. So, for instance, you know, he said, you know, this movie is going to change things for you, and I guarantee you, the women are going to love you. And I was like, well, the women already
love you, baby.
What can you possibly do?
That exchange did happen with different language. But that is true. Loren said, I already get women.
But in a very
humble way.
Yeah. That guy's talking was a very Darius Hollywood dynamic. And he said it's going to be on a whole nother level. And you weren't lying. It actually was a whole nother level. But what I really loved was.
Wow.
Oh, I cashed in.
Super uncomfortable. Super uncomfortable now.
I got all these notes, and I'm not going to get to use any of them.
No.
We're just going to riff.
But again, just the idea that, you know, black folk were just in a different space. And the fact that if you can look at the movie and see how we spoke and how we regarded each other. And there's some honesty there. Seen from a prism that we hadn't seen before. Queen.
Ms. Long.
Oh, stop it.
Queen.
If you knew what I just left at my house with my children, you would not be saying queen. You'd be saying housekeeper, cook, organizer.
Cutting up.
Yeah. Anyway. Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. I want to hear a woman's perspective on what it was like to make this film, because so much of it hinges on the relationship between the two of you, both the story that's being told, but also the way y'all look at one another. So what was it like for you to step into this part? Because it was different for you at this time in your career as well.
I mean, I was relatively still very new to the business, and I hadn't proven myself to be able to open a movie. And it didn't open so big, but thank God now you guys have all followed us, and it's become a cult classic. And you know, I always say that this film was before its time. Black people were so excited to see ourselves like this, but I think when the film was released, because there was no formulaic process to follow, it sort of got lost as this hidden gem. And I'm okay with that. You know why? Because we're all here today celebrating. And that, to me, when you have staying power and the story is relevant and we are able to give ourselves permission to show Black love on film, then I feel like I did my job.
Yes.
And had the movie done
huge,
crazy, we probably wouldn't be sitting here right now.
Yeah.
You know.
It's true. But also for me, I read the script and I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm from Brooklyn. My father's a poet. My mother's a fine artist. So this world was very familiar to me. And when I look back on all the women that I've played in this beautiful career and these wonderful opportunities, Nina is probably the most like myself. And so when I couldn't sit through the movie, I was going to cry, like literally, because it touches me in such a deep way. And the only disappointment I have is that we have not seen a film like this since. I didn't really answer your question, but I had a good time making the movie.
There you go.
The kiss in the rain was everything. Lorenz has the best screen lips.
You know, it's not about the questions. We just talking. Isaiah, I wanted to ask you a question also, because I remember, again, at the time of my life when I saw this film for the first time in theaters, I bought my ticket. I just remember seeing your relationship, your marriage, and I thought it was portrayed in such a complex way, and I hadn't seen that. You know, and I think there's something about the role you play in this film that stands outside of what the other characters are going through. Just speak to me about, you know, how the script came to you and what you felt like you saw yourself in it.
Quickly, yes, I do have a story I just shared with Lorenz about. Oh, thank you. About that scene. I don't know if he knew that story. I'll share it. But before that, I trusted Robbie Reed because I wouldn't be here if it were not for Robbie Reed. I got my first audition for Crooklyn, which was absolutely horrible. I think I scared everybody in the room. And I beat myself all the way back to Brooklyn because I knew I wasn't going to get that job. But whatever Robbie did, thank you, Robbie. Thank you. So I knew from that point that if I couldn't get page 13 in a script, that it probably wouldn't be something that I would want to do and be proud of for the rest of my life. Unfortunately, being African American, I got the nerve to be picky about, on top of everything, how hard it is to get a job. But I got the nerve to feel like if my children would see my work one day, how would they feel? And my 18-year-old and my 12-year-old daughter and my 15-year-old son, who were not born before this movie is made, the biggest regret I have in this film is when the character Savant's wife comes home, and because I wasn't a father then, and I desperately wanted to be, all I could do was just rub the top of his head.
You know, wait, let me Isaiah, you know who else gave me that criticism? It was Spike. Spike said to me, he said, "You fucked up that scene."
I think we did.
And I said,
"Can we reshoot that?"
I said, "What do you mean?" Because I thought Isaiah was fantastic in that moment when he comes
with the wife
up, and he goes, "No. A father would have gone to his kid first before his wife." Now, I don't have any kids. You didn't have any kids. Nobody knew.
If I would have been on set, I would have.
So he had pointed that out to me, and so I'm glad that you and I both recognize that we kind of we missed it right there.
Yeah. The other scene where we ad-lib that hopping, skipping, jumping, tell me how to stay in the relate. Well, I'm put my wife. I'm embarrass her a little bit, but my wife and I just got married. February of '96, pretty much. We were doing the film, I think January or a little bit later. We just got married. And we were still trying to figure out that scene. I really understood that power play. Like, I'm going to pretend that I'm a man. I'm not going to be upset about this. And we had this big argument, which wasn't as big as I think about it. Also, Jeremiah Samuels always trying to cut my hair, too. He came in my trailer with some clippers. He was the one to cut my hair. But those two stresses created that scene with you. And I remember the face that Lorenz was like, "Dude, this is not the script. But you look like you need a hug." I don't know where I went. It's like and another thing, since we're here, and it was, thank you for holding me down, Lorenz. It's like, I don't know what that was. I don't think that's going to make the movie, but you need a hug.
My pleasure. Yeah, you need a hug. I'm going to give you a hug later.
So that's my story back.
All love. And speaking of that, I just want to interject really quickly. The thing, going back to one of the differences, but I'm very proud of what you were able to do as a director for me, Ted, was the vulnerability, I think, is the thing that I was fighting against. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't used to characters being as vulnerable as Darius, and I think it was important to show us as men being vulnerable, and I thank you for that. So that was my biggest tug of war. It wasn't about women and all that other stuff. It really was about just being vulnerable. And as I look back on it, and as I am in my own personal life, how vulnerable, I can be. I think it was really, really important for us, for the world to see, and for the culture. So thank you.
If I may, real quick,
That's Leonard Roberts.
hit this
That's Leonard Roberts. One time for Leonard Roberts.
I had no career when this came to me. I was fresh out of drama school. I was working one of my very first jobs in Toronto, and my agent at the time called me up and he said, "Leonard, Jane Alderman wants you to come in to meet this guy, Ted Witcher." And he's got this story, and I gave it a read through. I breezed through it, and he starts talking about it, and he's just like, "Well, it's go, you read it and let me know what you think." And I read this thing, I said, "Dude, I'm in. Where is this guy? Like, I want to meet him." And he's like, "I mean, really?" He's like, "I mean, I think it's," and I say, "Dude, you don't think anything beyond your prism as a middle-aged white guy. Because you've seen every incarnation of the romantic comedy from Annie Hall to Sleepless in Seattle and everything in between. But if you're 22 and you're black and you're going out to see a movie with your friends, you haven't seen a movie in 1996 where somebody hasn't died at the end."
Right, yeah, that's true.
So for that alone, I was down.
Yes.
And all these people were like starting to become heroes of mine. Isaiah was the first person I saw on stage when I started drama school. Bill was the first comic I saw on stage in St. Louis. Def Comedy Jam came through. I remember going to see Menace, and the theater in Chicago was like deathly silent. And it's just like, it was a blessing beyond blessings to be a part of this. I would have done the catering on this thing.
The catering was amazing.
Yes.
Well,
You're welcome.
I'm actually curious about Mr. Bellamy. How did Bill Bellamy come to be in the film? Because, man, again, talk about seeing somebody in a whole new light, man. It was just a beautiful performance.
It was interesting because at that time, I had just bust on the scene. I was on fire as a stand-up comic. You know what I mean? I had HBO under my belt. I was on MTV. And my personality is more fun, and And Ted was like, "I love you in your real life, but Hollywood, that's a motherfucker, man. You gotta be able to flip that shit." And I was like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, Hollywood is a hater." And I was like, "I can hate." and I mean, me and Ted, I remember this. You remember this conversation? He's like, "B, people ain't gonna like you. They like you after this movie. You gonna have a problem." And I had a problem. Women were coming up to me. "You know what? I swear to God. I don't know if you Hollywood or Bill, but both of y'all can kiss my ass like."
Now, Bernadette.
That was about 6 years in a row, too. I was like, "It's a movie."
So Bernadette, did you have the chemistry read with Bill? Because I feel like the two of these characters are kind of like they're in all these scenes together diametrically
It
opposed.
was just amazing. I don't know how we did it.
Y'all were ad-libbing, right?
But, tribute to Ted. We actually worked together on a master's, a young lady's master's piece, and he was the quietest guy on the set, but he was the only guy that had a job, like, after we were all done. And to walk into the audition, they didn't tell me who this movie was or what it was about or anything. And I walk in and I'm like, "Oh my God, I know you, hi." And it was, so that alone, like, kind of made me go and breathe. And then my character wasn't even written when I auditioned. He was like, "Okay, so you need to improv." And I was like, "Improv what?" "I'm going to give you the scene." And he gave me the scene, and it was actually for, I realized it was for Isaiah's scene with his wife that we improv'd. And so I had 4 auditions. This dude made me audition 4 times. He did. And what was cool, though, was that my last audition, he had me come in to do an African dance.
my God, you were so amazing.
I thought that was impromptu.
I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. So I came in, no shoes on, African pants, had my routine down, had my camera, my boom box, and Sean was in the room, and a couple other people were in the room, and did my dance. And he was like, I knew you was going to bring it.
Well, it's interesting because my idea for that scene was that Sheila just sort of impromptu stands up and starts dancing. Like it wasn't meant to be good. It was meant to just be something somebody did at a party who's had a couple glasses of wine. So somehow Jane read the script and put it in the breakdown, like must be able to do, Bantu dance from the... So she comes in and she can actually do it, like for real, which was not my idea. But I was like, well, she's so good, like we should just put her in the movie. And so the thing in the movie became much better than it actually was intended to be because you can actually dance.
Way to
So there you
go.
go. But let me just say this about quickly about the cast. The challenge with this kind of, other than the principles, the challenge with this kind of movie, filling out the other parts, is that the movie isn't really a plot-driven kind of movie, so you're not looking for the guy to play the police chief and the guy who plays the doctor who fixes the thing, and the CIA director comes in. You're basically trying to fill out some colors so that you can manipulate the mood and the vibe of the thing as it's going on, because it's not really a plot-driven or even a strongly narrative piece, really, right? So you get a color. So I'm like, I got Bill. Okay, what's going to go with that color? I got an Isaiah. Okay, well, I need somebody younger, maybe. I need Leonard. You know what I mean? And you put it together like a painter would. You put one color down, you put another color. You're like, oh, let me flip that. That's how you do this kind of movie. And that's why it's such a crapshoot and why I got so lucky with this particular group.
I just had a question. What color?
The editor too. The editor and the camera person and Pilar McCurry too.
Yeah. Wait. If we're gonna talk about colors and you painting Lisa Nicole Carson, your face, your face in the cab. It is like
best
like
cab ride of my life.
God. I love the cab ride.
Talk to us.
Hello.
How you doing?
No, I just wanted to say that I really, really enjoyed all of the movies that were made in the 90s. And I think that one of the most wonderful things is that Love Jones has risen to the top of the heap.
Yes.
And I just want to give Ted his props for that. He really held me down through the film. That's the most important thing that I remember, is that he was really there. He was my backbone during the film and working with this cool cast. And everybody was wonderful. And I was just so honored to be a part.
And that smile. Look at that
She's
smile.
so funny. She's trying to play coy right now. We didn't
already been
have.
trying.
Yeah, exactly.
I love her.
I know.
I wanna.
Smooth butter. Just
No,
butter.
everybody was so cool. I was just so honored to, because this is what I did in New York. I mean, I hung out with my friends. I chilled. I went to clubs. I drank. I partied. I went to rock clubs. I did everything. And then there was this movie, and it was there in the movie. And I was just like, great. I'll just go to work and do what I do in New York. Yeah, so.
Yeah. I want to talk to the text for a second because the movie just looks and sounds. I'm so glad it was a print. Oh my God.
Yes.
It was just beautiful. And it's got this whole kind of like, I mean, I've been to Chicago a few times, but this Chicago is just like stamped into your memory. So talk to me about cutting the movie together and shooting it. You know, we'll speak to the cinematographer first. Speak to me for a second, Ernie, because you guys have all these
Ernest Holzman, ASC.
these very hard sources, underlighting all this beautiful black skin and primary colors, bruh. What did you do? Talk to me.
Well, Ted and I first met at Nate and Al's, I think it was, and we talked about the movie. And then when we got to Chicago, he showed me some books of photographs. They were all black and white. So I knew that he wanted to have a kind of a monochromatic look to the film, and so I purposely, elected not use a lot of bright colors in the lighting, except for the reggae scene and the stepping scene where we backlit with blue and then we backlit with red in the reggae scene, and everything else was pretty neutral. And Sean's wardrobe was pretty neutral, and the walls were pretty. Roger's walls were pretty neutral.
Sean Barton, the costume.
Sean B.
Sean.
There she is.
And then very briefly, when we were talking about Nina's photography, we discussed the possibility of opening the film with some black and white B-roll. And so since I was there during prep, I just went out and did a lot of stuff with a production assistant myself, which I really enjoyed. And it made it into the movie, which was really great.
Excellent.
And I will just say one thing about, seeing the movie tonight was like seeing it for the first time.
Yes, it was.
And occasionally I'd look at something and say, oh, I shot that. And
Yes, you did, bro.
and my favorite shot in the movie, by the way, Nia, is your close-up when, Lorenz gets the call from Lisa that morning and your eye opens. I've always loved that close-up of you. And
Thank you.
Well, let me just say quickly, just to add quickly onto that, Ernie came to me through Jeremiah Samuels. We didn't know each other. But what impressed me about Ernie was that he had a TV background, which I knew I was going to need because the schedule was very aggressive. And he started his career as Jordan Cronenweth's assistant. And so he was the AFI intern on Blade Runner and had assisted Jordan on commercials and movies throughout the 1980s. And so I knew that, okay, well, we can find, there's a common language there that we knew we could get to where we wanted to, get to in terms of the lighting and what we had to do with the photography and cast with all black people, all different range of skin tones. The thing you have to keep in mind, most people don't recognize this, is that you go see a mainstream Hollywood movie in the days prior to the advent of the DI, and all of the white skin tones are pretty even. They're all pretty much the same. Or at least that's how the Kodak's negative renders them, even though white people in real life have different tones. In the movies, they tend to get evened out, and it's pretty similar. Whereas this whole range of skin tones was going to be very challenging.
I'm caramel.
You know what I mean? And so anyway, right, exactly. So Ernie and I had to work that part of it out and figure out what we're going to do. But that's and I should say finally, the photography at the beginning of the picture, with the exception of one shot, is mine. All of that black and white is Ernie shot himself. So
I have to.
And by the way, Ted,
thing,
wanting to shoot the film on the slowest speed possible, Ted wanted really rich, really fine grain, so we shot it at ASA 100. And so, it just added to the challenge of the project, which I embraced.
Ernie, my grandma would say, you are anointed, bruh, because the skin in this movie is just so good. So the only person up here who I've met before this evening is Maisie Hoy, who edited this film, because, and I'm going to just speak for like 30 seconds, the editor of Moonlight, Joy McMillan, Academy Award nominee Joy McMillan, assisted Maisie on like 7 features before coming with me to make Moonlight. So Maisie, I've had martinis with you. I had no idea you cut this movie. Talk to me about it.
Well, you probably didn't wait till the end of the movie.
I was probably making out when the credits roll. That's why. So how did you how'd you come to link up with Theodore and cut the film?
I'm not sure. I think it was Nick Wexler. I think Ted's got the.
it was Nick. I didn't have anybody on my list. I didn't know what to do. Nick Wexler had produced The Player that was directed by Robert Altman. She had cut The Player, had worked in Bob's cutting room her whole career, started on McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And in fact, fun fact, Maisie actually, as a young woman, plays one of the Chinese prostitutes in McCabe and Mrs. Miller and has a nude scene.
In the hot tub.
Gotta go look that up.
Going to watch that tonight.
We're looking that up tonight.
1975.
Always love the editing of Love Jones. I'm looking that up tonight. Amazon.com.
I think I'm gonna need Lance.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So the fact that she had worked for Robert Altman caught my attention because I knew that for the scenes with the group, I wanted to play with this sort of overlapping dialogue that Altman, I kind of stole the technique from him. I was very influenced by MASH and some of the other pictures he had made. Exactly. So I needed somebody who technically understood how to do that, who had done that for the guy who invented it. So that was a part of it. The fact that she was a woman was a part of it as well, because I knew that, okay, it's a romantic thing and I'm just me. I don't want to be stuck with a bunch of dudes in a cutting room trying to figure out, is this working emotionally or not? So I felt she'd be helpful that way as well. So now you can, but that's how she came.
Did it come together quick, or did it come together, did it take you time to find the film? Because some of the match cutting is just extraordinary. Talk to me about, in the edit room, how quickly did it come together?
Well, actually, it came together quite quickly because Ted knew what he wanted, and he shot 2 cameras. So all that overlapping dialogue was easy to edit. And when I was talking to Ted, I told him, I said, I'm not afraid of cutting a movie where there's overlapping dialogue, because usually, when you're on the set, the sound guy would say, no overlapping dialogue, please, and then you have to invent it, which doesn't feel natural at all. And so what I love about this movie, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen it in 20 years, is that the naturalness of everybody, And my favorite scene is the cab ride. And I'll tell you why. Because I go and I do seminar, teach at different schools, and I use that as an example of comedy. Now,
Wow.
Brilliant.
Timing.
Brilliant.
And I remember when we were getting notes from the studio, they wanted me to cut to Nina and stay on her. And then when we came back, I said to Ted, I said, I don't agree with that, because it really is about the reaction of Lisa. She sells it, and then at the end, you go to Nina, and it's like the biggest laugh, of the whole movie. And I didn't realize how funny the whole movie was.
Fucking hilarious, yes.
But also, Lisa, we improv'd a lot of that stuff.
I'm sorry,
in the
Academy, I
taxi.
keep cursing.
I just followed her lead because I wasn't as confident with my comedic skills. So
Nina, you
we
did
definitely
great,
just.
You did great.
Your facial expression. I'd like to just add.
Well, I do know what good you know what is, but still follow it.
I just want to add one thing about
We had nice chemistry.
the overlapping dialogue.
Nice chemistry.
Maisie was
Nice stuff.
kind enough to suggest that we shoot dueling close-ups, which is not the easiest thing to light.
Right.
And you have again, another challenge. But your desire to have that overlapping cutting that worked seamlessly was not only a challenge for me, but I thought it looked great and it worked great, and it taught me a lot.
Well, it also saved us a lot of time.
But
Too,
it works.
right.
It made the energy. It's just like, like you say, you have to invent cross-cutting
Right.
dialogue and whatnot. But it was a challenge to me, but I thought it was really cool.
Right.
A lot of people in my profession don't.
You tried to set him up, but he got you, Maisie.
A lot of DPs hate that when you have to shoot.
Trust me, I know, bro. All right. I want to talk about the music for a second. And if this is a church, this is when we pass around. Somebody
Incredible.
pass around the collection plate. When we talk about the music, we got them. So, how? Yes, the both of y'all. I mean, both the compositions and the soundtrack. Just how?
Well, Ted, it was such a great time for music. You got to figure when you're coming with all that, with the Maxwells, with the, just all that stuff, with the Jamiroquais, with the, there was all this great fusion. You've got like the jazzmatazz stuff coming out. You've got like brand new heavies, and then you have this movie where there's this whole world that people haven't seen on screen, and then. So the timing for the music was perfect. And then Ted had such amazing music already scripted as far as some of the jazz, and he had already was going to hire Daryl. And so me knowing those big posts, and it was just so easy from my heart to fill in all the rest, like to go and sit with like a Leon Ware and Maxwell and have them redo something, because you were feeling it. You feel it, and feeling it in the studio with them, and then coming with that, and then going and having Lauryn Hill do like the sweetest thing, and she had just had a child, and I had just had a child, so I loved that song, and I loved the movie, and it was just really easy to slide things in, and plus it was like these characters were like my people. That's my crew who I would hang out with. So it was like, well, I just have to just put in the music we'd be listening to. And I still listen to this soundtrack all
To this
the
day.
time. All the time.
You know, Daryl, I wanted to speak to you too because the compositions are so thorough, the original music, that I was watching it and I was like, oh shit, that's Jeff Parker. Jeff Parker is in the house band. Jeff Parker is the guitarist and bassist for Tortoise. He's Chicago through and through. And he is in the house band in this movie. Please talk to me, brother. How? Again, how?
Well,
How?
I mean, actually, a lot of that was Ted. Actually, all of that was Ted. He's told me that he wanted me to play bass in the movie. And of course, I was, well, great, But all of the musicians, Teodris Avery on saxophone, Carl Allen on drums, yeah. This is the first time I scored a film. And he came to me and said that he wanted something like Lift from the Scaffold, Louis Malle. And I thought, when I watched that movie, the music is so stark that I thought, I feel like we need a little bit more, flavor there. So basically we were hanging out every day. So he'd come by and bring some film, and I'd sit at the piano and play. Well, I think this is, this works here. And we basically, Ted is a musician. Yes, he is. Even if he's not a performing or practicing musician. Right. I think that's pretty clear with, the music that he chose, and he's talking to you about colors, with the people that he chose. So that sensibility is there. It made it a real pleasure. And as I talked to other composers at the time that I was doing the film, and they asked me, well, what is the process like? And I told them, they said, that will never happen like that again, So I'm very thankful that, to have been part of it.
It's complete. The way we did the score was completely unorthodox. Yeah. I had this idea. This is the different. I had this idea that I wanted the score to be reminiscent of Elevator to the Gallows or Lift to the Scaffold, this Louis Malle film that Miles Davis had scored. Now, he did this score a few months prior to him recording Kind of Blue. So this music was actually kind of a run-up to the modal style that he was going to perfect on this record. So I was like, well, we need to do something like that. The difference between working with creative people and working with studio executives is you go to a studio executive is, but not with the exception of Helena, of course, is you go, yeah, I have this idea, it should be like this Miles Davis, and they go, how does that work? I don't understand, what is that like? Explain that, we don't do it that way, blah, 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 blah. I go to Daryl, I go, yeah, man, we need to make this sort of sound like Kind of Blue. And he's like, oh, yeah, cool. So we got these musicians together, and we had no money to do this thing. And we did no money. I went to, I'm sorry to hog the mic, but I went to a friend of mine is directing this $200 million tentpole that comes out in a couple weeks. He calls me up, he says, come down to the scoring session. I've never been to a big Hollywood scoring session. So I'm like, oh, I'll come. I go. It's an 80-piece orchestra at Fox, and there's like a zillion assistants, and I don't even know whose job it is to push record. We had no money. Me, Daryl, and Neil are copying the parts like at 2 a.m. at his apartment because we didn't have nobody to do that. That's a department of people on a studio picture. That's the three of us. So anyway, we do this thing in like 3 hours. We cut the whole thing with the musicians watching the scenes in the studio and improvising based on these charts. And that's how we did it in about 3 hours. Then we went to lunch. Totally unorthodox.
Now I gotta jump in, and I gotta rep for the studios and the producers and the executives because we've all been talking. Everybody's spoken except Julia. Miss Chasman, you're gonna speak now because look at all these elements that were aligned for the film you just saw. $7 million in 1997, maybe 10 million, 12 million in today. For this film, you know what I see? I see 2 cameras, 100 ISO stock. I see a score, this amazing soundtrack, all these wonderful performers. I see the support a film like this should have. So Julia and Nick Wexler and Helena, how did y'all do that? Tell me about putting the money together, putting the financing together, taking this a new line and being like, Ted's going to do what he wants to do. Talk to me.
Well, I don't, with all of the people who are involved in this, I don't really know that I did contribute that much, but I feel like I helped bring it all together, and it started with the script. As we developed the script, I always thought it was really important that that it would be a true ensemble. And I think that turned out to be, as I watched it tonight, just one of its greatest strengths. The budget that we had was basically, that was what we could get from the studio. And the financing was very much dependent on us getting Lorenz in the film, and that was, that was a
Yes.
must-have. And Nia also, of course. But, and then, when I look at what we put together in addition to that in terms of value, to have actors like Isaiah and Lisa Nicole join us and Bill, that was also fantastic. But in some ways, having very little money was a blessing because in Chicago, we had to cast a couple of our principals in Chicago to save money. And with the help of Jane Alderman, who worked with Robbie to cast the film, and I just want to mention her, especially because she passed away just last year, but she's one of the great local casting directors in the country, and all the Chicago films that you've seen will all have local casting by Jane, and she's the one who brought us Bernadette and Leonard, both of their first films, and it's just an example of how often no money is the mother of it's invention. Same with on the music. I mean, it's you wanted Stark. Well, you got Stark. It's just the three of you, but the
Spoken like a producer.
behind the
Love
scenes
it.
part is the studio wanted Ted to hire a regular composer to underscore the film. It's like, we had to explain to them who Daryl was, and I don't mean right.
Can I add to this?
What?
Daryl's like, what?
You're exactly right, because Daryl Jones, whose day job is being a Rolling Stone,
Yeah.
but he had never composed a score before. I knew him from Chicago. And so I go to Mike DeLuca, who was the president of the studio at the time, and he's like, "So I'd like to hire Daryl." He goes, "So,
Yeah.
has he ever done a movie before?" No. And he goes, and Mike looked at me and was kind of like, "Okay." And that was the culture that was Mike, and that was the culture at New Line, because, Lost in Space was going over budget, and that was more important to deal with than the black people with $7 million off in the corner. Like, I don't really, okay, you say he's good, well, whatever, I don't care anyway. So that's how it happened. That is how it happened.
Ted, didn't the house band at the Sanctuary get recorded live?
Yes, all of it. Everything on stage got recorded.
Now, was that necessity being the mother of invention?
No, that was my
your
decision,
choice?
because I wanted to. Because every time you see somebody in a movie and they're lip syncing to a track, it looks fake. So I was like, why don't we just get 3 cameras on that day and have them play for real, and then we'll just cut it together, and that's exactly what we did.
To even chime on that, that moment, the poetry was. We didn't rehearse that at all with the band, right? So I had told Ted that the poem that was written was pretty extensive, and I needed to kind of alter it a little bit and kind of shorten it and condense it and make it my own, because I would go and do some research and hang out at the Cotton Club downtown Chicago, where it was really happening when it came to spoken word, and I knew that I couldn't do that stuff, what those guys are doing. I was pretty intimidated by what I would see the men and women do. And I just wanted to make it my own. And Ted would say, "Hey, man, I'm going to come up to your hotel room and I want to hear it." And I'm like, just chill, just back up. Let me figure it out. Let me just get my mind wrapped around it. And he respected that process. And he says, "So do you want to have a run at it?" I said, "Listen, man, we just might as well just, just roll it and just rip one." And I go up there, and I knew it was going to be some kind of music. I didn't quite know what it was, but I was just like, listen, let me just memorize these lines, get it all out, and just live in the moment. And magic happened right there on the stage. And I think we only did one. We did like one, maybe two takes just for safety purposes. But I'm happy that they had the cameras and everything set up. And it was weird because after doing that one or two takes, I hadn't performed that poem until like 10, 15 years later. It was like that was the first time, and that was it. And I didn't want to do it from after that. But Nia and I got together on a couple award shows, and the pressure was on, so I had to memorize it. But it was
just want to add to the poem. Wait, no.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
I just want to talk about the poem thing. So I remember that day so clearly because we were all scared to death, and I didn't know my poem. I'm just going to keep it real. I didn't know one line. I was nervous. And I said, don't you think Nina would read her poem? I feel like she's the type of girl that would come in with she's new to poetry. She'd come in with her booklet and she'd just read it. And he goes, okay.
And it's interesting because since then, the poetry world has really flourished. I mean, there's a community of spoken word all across the country and around the world, and this movie represents a culture that has not really been seen or spoken, and we were able to show them in a way. I've met some incredible poets who said, you allowed just like the everyday normal guy to get up there and do his thing. And it was filled, like I said, with vulnerability. And I interpreted this piece the way that Lorenz would do it. And it made a lot of sense. And again, I'm just the process of, working with Ted, who knew what he wanted, but he also gave us as performers sort of license to really just find our voice and bring these characters to life. And it's a testimony, if you can really think about it, the music, the sound, the editing, the way we were lit.
Real filmmaking.
Yeah,
I miss this.
That's a film.
I'm so aggravated with the digital world. I'm sorry. I know it's faster and cheaper, but I want to be lit. I want to know where my key light is. I am 46. I need to know where my light is.
And you still fine as a...
I'm sorry. It's the biggest challenge right now, being who I am at this point in my career, because people just throw the stuff up and say, okay, action. I'm like, well, damn. Can we get a rehearsal? Can I get an Ernie light? Can I get something that makes me feel like this is still an art and not just a process, a thing a money-making vehicle? How about let's maintain the integrity of the art and put some real lights up, and don't tell me you're going to fix it in post, because I know that you're not going to fix it in post. I know that I'm going to watch the rehearsal with my stand-in, and she better look like me and have the same complexion. I'm going to go and watch the monitor and see what the shot is. And then I'm going to say, I need more light in my eyes. And if you don't, I'm sorry. We have to, artists, all actresses out there, you have to look out for yourself. You have to ask for what you need, and you have to look out for yourself. Because otherwise, you just become not lit well.
Can I just...
I'm alone, y'all.
Can I just chime in real quick? I just really want to say, being from Chicago,
it's all about lighting.
I watched the film in my 20s, and my family can attest, I haven't watched it since. And so to be where I am now, 20 years later, and watch the film, it was like, I made this comment and I said, I was in a really good film. And I wasn't trying to be flippant, but it was like, this was my first film. And it was really good.
Really good.
And,
You know what I'm saying?
And
And I think I want to thank Ted publicly, one, for taking a chance on me, for allowing us, like Loren said, to be artists, because most of our scenes were improv, weren't they? Like, and Ted would go, "Can I just have my cue line? Can you keep saying stuff different?" Because we would just be like, Bill would say something, we'd comment, and I laughed, if you noticed, the whole movie, because it was like, because stuff was said that was funny, and I think, wow, I've not been in a situation in a film where I was taken care of. I remember being in Nina's trailer, and she's going, "Okay, so these are pictures," and she was kind of educating me on, when you do another film, make sure she talked, the way she just talked is how she talked in the trailer. Like, educating me, like, look, I'm letting you know how it really is. And, just being with theater actors like Isaiah, and it was just as a first timer, if I felt safe and I felt believed in, which gave me freedom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I gotta say something. Ted he's very humble, and he's like, the thing about it is, like, when we talk about all these things that we point out, it really is the difference between a director and a filmmaker. When you say that he is a musician, he understands, and everything, every element about the movie is its own character. And so it really allowed this to become such a gem and a classic. And, this movie certainly will go down as that. I've met many people, and I tell the story that, after doing Menace to Society and Dead Presidents, I was accepted by the brothers in the hood, the thugs, who would always say, yeah, my girl really loved that movie, Love Jones. Right, your girl loved the Love. But it really spoke to that. And this movie, over a time, has become therapeutic for people. This movie is therapy in a real way, and I don't want to overlook that. So I want to give you your love and your props for that.
Real quick,
brother.
I'm getting the red light, so I want to give you the floor to close this thing.
Yes.
Up, so.
Well, what I was I'll use my time to add to that is that what occurred to me some years after the thing was released, that there were men coming up to me, and one time there were men who were not, how should I put it? You use the word thug. I mean, these are hard rocks. You know what I mean?
Masculine.
This is from a really overtly masculine part of the culture, right? Men who did not have the tools the language to express themselves.
Who weren't given permission.
Or that, however you want to, they couldn't articulate what we're talking about right now. So, anyways, this guy comes up to me, and he wanted to express this to me, but he did not have the language for it. He could not, and all he did was kind of grab me and hug me.
I was gonna kill you, but your movie was
here's
good.
Here's the thing. I knew that the movie. That's true. But I knew that at that point that the movie had some power that I hadn't anticipated, because it was, like you said, it was allowing people who don't really just have that type of experience, or who don't show that they're having that. More importantly, don't show that they're having that type of experience, to have that type of experience for themselves. And that was all he could do to express that to me. And so what I realized was, the power of the movie is it's a chick flick for guys. Ding, 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 ding. That wasn't my intention, but that's what we arrived at,
Hey, and on that note, let's all rise and give praise to the Church of Theodore Butcher and the cast and crew of Love
Thanks,
Jones.
guys, for coming.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out and supporting tonight.
We'll see y'all in another 20 years.
Yeah, I'll be with my walker by then.